Welcome into another bonus episode of Stone Cold Stros. I'm Brandon Strange with Charlie Palillo and Josh Jordan. Follow them on X at Palillo and at Josh Jordan 975 and read their work on sportsmap.com. On today's episode, we check in on some of the latest reports coming out of the GM meetings, including some interesting quotes from Dana Brown. Speaking of the front office, there will be one less decision maker in that much maligned front office committee. Scott Boras says Bregman's championship blood makes him AB positive. Thank goodness Alex's initials are not HIV. We'll probably edit that out. Before we get started, click like on the video if you want to see more off-season content. Hit subscribe if you haven't already. We know there are still a bunch of you out there who haven't yet subscribed, and we are knocking on the door of 25,000 subs. If you have subbed, be sure to click on the bell for notifications so you know as soon as new content drops, because YouTube's off-season algorithm sucks. And if you're on the go, we're on all your favorite podcast apps like Apple and Spotify. As we mentioned, the GM meetings are underway. The Astros media and fans get to read the tea leaves and overanalyze all the quotes coming from Dana Brown. First thing that jumped out to me was something that we have harped on, which was the Astros approach at the plate. Brown acknowledged that the front office met with hitting coaches Troy Snitker and Alex Cintron after the season in hopes of getting back to a more patient offensive approach at the plate. Brown described the meeting as a nice conversation. One interesting quote from Brown, he said, quote, "I don't know if we should be in the business of blaming coaches for a lack of production, particularly when the same players have had success with these same hitting coaches," end quote. Somewhere, Texans OC Bobby Slowick is fervently nodding his head in agreement. Do you guys agree or disagree with that position as regarding the accountability of the hitting coaches?
Generally agree with qualifications. Certainly with more veteran players, right? The guys who make all the money. In the end, it's on the guys who are in the batter's box. But as we've discussed here before, if you're going to have coaches and pay them and have specific duties or areas that fall under their accountability profile, so to speak, they can't be exempt from blame. I don't think there are very many hitting coaches who are huge difference makers. Alex Cintron and Troy Snitker certainly are not on the short list of those who make dramatic impacts for the better. Similarly with pitching coaches. Did Brent Strom get dumb in his old age that Arizona fired him at the end of the season, or did some of their pitchers just fall off in terms of performance? Now, when you're developing young players, and this can go down to your minor league system, with your ethos and how you cultivate batting eye and working account and pitch recognition. But in the end, there's a lot of, you can lead a horse to water, you can't make him drink. If a guy's a good hitter or a patient guy at the plate, it starts with you have some of it or you don't. And can you breed ferocity in a boxer? I think there's a core of internal, you're either just a killer or you're not. I doubt Jeremy Pena is ever going to become a disciplined, very good offensive player. Yainer Diaz being younger and so much more talented, you hope, not like he's 21 years old, but that you can at least show some improvement. Shame on Dana Brown in the front office for not having this conversation, I don't know, maybe at the All-Star break last season, that you waited until after the season and all the horses had galloped out of the barn and you were dismissed from the playoffs in 2 days. But I think foremost blame goes to the players playing the game. But if coaches get a free pass, why have coaches?
Yeah, that's the thing, right? Because things change. Baseball evolves. They're always discovering new analytics, new things to look at there. So it has to matter somehow. And you always, especially in football, you hear stuff about it. We needed a new voice in the room. They were losing buy-in from the locker room, this kind of stuff. That's what the head coach, more about culture. But coaches bring some of that to the table, whether it's in baseball or football or whatever. So there has to be some accountability for that. But yeah, I'm with Charlie. Overall, it's the players that have to go out there and produce, but it's also a strategic thing with the Astros where Dana Brown, as you mentioned, Brandon, they're looking to work counts deeper. And that should be something that they were coaching throughout the season, throughout the playoffs. Let's work some at bats here. Let's give the pitcher more opportunities to make a mistake that we can capitalize on. So it seems like they're happy with those guys. They're not going anywhere, but we've seen a drop off from this offense, and there's a lot of good hitters on this team. I don't think it's wrong for us to think that they can perform better, and the guys that are supposed to help them with that are the hitting coaches.
When Alvarez and Altuve both were stinking it up in May, I mean, was any of that on Cintron or Snitker? Now, maybe it's their job to grind late at night, come up with that little piece of video that, here's the little subtle adjustment that you need to make to get back on track. I think the hitters are going to self-correct, and there is an inevitability of slumps and surges. Were they really smart with Chas McCormick in 2023 and then blathering idiots with Chas McCormick in 2024? To me, that goes to Chas McCormick, much more so than the hitting coaches. The blame game is part of it. And again, if you're going to be paid as a hitting coach and the hitting really falls off, you have to eat some of the blame. But if the Astros had the best hitting coach in baseball, whoever that might be, I don't think it's going to turn Jeremy Pena into a 300 batting walk machine.
I agree that it's ultimately about the player production. If I can take a devil's advocate position here, though, the Astros pitching coaches have a different reputation. When the Astros brought over Yusei Kikuchi, there was a thought that they could adjust his pitch usage, and it worked. He was a better pitcher, and now he's set up for success going into free agency, which we'll get into in a later episode. But that's definitely on the coaching. That's definitely a credit to the coaching. And I think it's interesting that the Astros do not have that same sort of reputation on the offensive side. Now, speaking of offense, Dana Brown said he's bullish on Chas McCormick's future. I want to dig into that quote a little bit before, but first, just a quick reminder that if you're watching this video on Monday, November 11th, tonight is our tailgate event at 8th Wonder Brewery. We hope to see you out there. All kinds of food, drinks, activities, all of which are included with your ticket. VIP tickets include a meet and greet with Texans legends Brian Cushing and Travis Johnson. For details and tickets, go to tailgate.culturemap.com and use promo code SportsMap for $10 off all ticket types. We hope to see you there. When asked about tendering contracts to Jake Myers and Chas McCormick, Dana Brown said that McCormick had a down year and they expect him to bounce back. And it sounds like, platoon him in left field. Now, Chaz's track record does seem to dictate that he does get a benefit of the doubt here. Jake Myers, on the other hand, doesn't really have a high water mark to bounce back to. What do you guys take away from that quote? And how do you think they'll handle the outfield in 2025?
McCormick had basically a season and a half where he was a very good player. Jake Myers had about 1 month. Now, that month was 2024, which as you have to go back to 2023. But in terms of some body of work, clear edge Chas McCormick. Chas turns 30 about a month into the season. So if there's a bounce back, it better come quickly. I think part of this is the Astros farm system is so fallow. Their budget is so stretched that every opportunity goes to McCormick and Myers because what else is there? The purported number one prospect who we've discussed, Jacob Melton, he hadn't really distinguished himself in the minor leagues. He crept into the top 100 on MLB Pipeline, but he had about 255 in the minor leagues with a 750-ish OPS in the minor leagues this past season. So he's not pounding on the door. Their next best outfield prospect, Luis Baez, was after being promoted to Double-A. Now, he's just 21 years old, so he has a little more runway, you'd hope, to blossom into young, quality, cheap labor. But with Yordan Alvarez, if not full-time DH, he's going to be most-time DH. So that opens up left field in addition to, those who are, Jake Myers again is the primary center fielder, right? The rules dictate you deploy 3 outfielders. So healthy Kyle Tucker covers 1. The other 2, what else is there? You can't be playing Mauricio Dubon as a regular in left field and say, yeah, that's good for the offense. That's good for the team. So McCormick Myers until another contestant surfaces.
Yeah, and they did. They traded for Taylor Trammell from the Yankees for just basically cash consideration. So that tells you what the Yankees think of him. And he's had some decent stuff in the minor leagues, but on the major league level, this guy's proven nothing. But
he's Trey
left-handed,
right-handed version.
So there you go.
Prospect.
And I mean, doesn't give me a lot of hope. He hasn't shown you anything, but they're hoping maybe they can find a spark with this guy, but it's a long shot and they know it. Dana Brown is telling you exactly what's going to happen. I feel that Chas can be an everyday left fielder, which means he didn't say center field, and you don't really have any other options there. So I think the plan is it's going to be Jake in center. It's going to be Chas in left. And by saying everyday left fielder, it's what we probably think. They think of Yordan, that they'd rather have him DHing more times than not. I mean, the guy wasn't able to slide into second base without severely hurting himself last year. And we've seen him almost hurt himself a few times in left field. He's just such an important piece that you don't want any chance of him getting hurt again. So I think that's going to be what they decide to do. The other quote I found interesting from Dana was that if Chas doesn't turn the corner, then maybe we have to make some type of move before the deadline. So, and that's going to obviously depend on where the team's at when the trade deadline comes around. Are they buyers? Are they sellers? But it also lets you know there's a clock on this. But Chas is the only one that's shown you anything as a hitter between him and Jake Myers. And Charlie mentioned Jacob Melton. Another quote we got from Dana is that could he come in and have a great spring and start real well in the minors and be in the big leagues and make an impact? So they're telling you right there about Melton, that even if he has a great spring, the plan is not for him to be on the big league roster. It's to send him back to the minors and see if he can perform there. So I think they're telling us everything we need to know. They want Chas to be the everyday left fielder. They want Jake to do it in center, and hope that the bats get better. But Chas is the really one you should have any hope with that, because he's the only one that's proven that he can be a good major league hitter.
You used the word there twice, Josh. Their plan for the outfield, apart from Kyle Tucker, hope.
Yeah.
And Brandon?
Hope is not a plan. We say it all the time.
Jake Melton will be closer to 25 years old opening day than turning 24. So if this is their number one prospect, it's ridiculous if he isn't given every opportunity and then doesn't seize that opportunity to make the major league roster, like Drew Gilbert might with the Mets this coming season.
Well, besides the outfield, all eyes are on third. We mentioned Boris's quote about Alex Bregman being AB positive. The dad puns are kind of a signature with Boris. I saw Chandler Rome write about how Dana Brown's inability to articulate a real plan B for third base has given the leverage to Boris and Bregman's side. Charlie, you gave us a full rundown in the last episode. I believe it was the last episode. You gave us a full rundown of teams you thought would not be interested in Bregman. So I have to ask, do you agree with Rome's assessment?
The second base possibility can expand the list a little bit. But I have serious doubts about Alex Bregman defensively as a second baseman. Alex Bregman is slow. He has quick and wonderful hands, and very well-deservedly scored his first Gold Glove as a third baseman. But at second base, you need range to go into the hole. You need range to go up the middle more than the quick reaction stuff of third base. There's a difference between quick and fast. Bregman has quick twitch. He is slow. You see it on the bases. Second base, that he'd be some plus defensive second baseman, I think that's very much up in the air. But can you imagine Scott Boras sitting across from Dana Brown or anyone else at the table for the Astros saying, well, we're not just going to capitulate to you because we have Zach DeCenzo and we have Shea Whitcomb as options, as our top prospects who can play third base. Boras would either do a spit take of drinking or just laugh in their face. So the Astros are in a very grave position of weakness here. We just covered the big question marks in the outfield. If you add third base to that, we know first base remains one. So I'm just very curious to see how this plays out. Oh, by the way, collectively, we are dumbfounded that, it was a bone chip. It wasn't a gremlin. It wasn't sleeping funny. Now, because Alex Bregman is not currently a Houston Astro, at least the Astros couldn't futz around or just make up whatever medical story they were going to give to us on it, right? Boris said, oh yeah, he had a bone chip removed, and we'll be fine because he had it earlier this time. Remember, 5 years ago, it was in January, and it compromised spring training and preparation and all that. When you have $200 million or so riding on it, yeah, get that surgery right away, right, Alex? And I don't know if this is passive-aggressive or just having a little fun. It may have been deleted. I'm not an Instagram follow guy. But hey, guess who was at the Washington Commanders game Sunday? Alex Bregman. And guess which was the one National League team I identified a week ago that with its current roster and payroll composition, you'd say could be a candidate for Alex Bregman at third base as a quality player, veteran leader. the Washington Nationals. Now, Bregman might just say, hey, Jaden Daniels, LSU, I was supporting my guy. But I found that amusing. I'm just waiting for some movement. Blake Snell, go first, something to get free agent activity underway. If I'm Alex Bregman, I want resolution sooner than later. But until at least one big dollar player comes off the board and teams start spending money, that can shrink the pool. But I think Bregman's market is impacted by where Juan Soto winds up. If it's with the Yankees, they're out of the Bregman market. Maybe the Mets wind up in it if they don't re-sign Pete Alonso. If Soto, goes from the Bronx to Queens to the Mets, I could see the Yankees aggressively jumping in on Alex Bregman. So we're just going to have to hurry up and wait a little bit on Alex. But no, I don't think under any circumstances are there 15 teams saying, we'll give you that blank check for Alex Bregman. You name the years and the money, Scott Boras.
I wonder if there is kind of a plan B at third base that's flying under the radar. We talked about how Dana didn't think the hitting coaches should necessarily be held accountable, but in another coaching move here, Gary Pettis is gone. They bring in Tony Perez-Chica, and they talked about him that he's an infield guy, that they believe he's a guy that can take your infield to the next level. So I find it's funny that we don't expect the hitting coaches to get better production out of the hitters. That's their fault. But we bring this guy in, the infield's automatically going to get so much better to the next level, whatever that is, which kind of made me think Shea Whitcomb was a disaster at third base last year. So this move here might be pointed at him. Like, can we get this guy to be a better defender? Because I think they like some of the stuff he did from an offensive perspective, but there were some games where he was just a butcher at third base. So I wonder if this might be something that they're, in the background, to where if Bregman leaves, that maybe they can get the defense to go up a tick or two with Whitcomb, and maybe he's your guy at third base. But boy, that's relying on a lot for an infield coach to boost that. He's going to be your new third base coach, and apparently he's going to be hitting a lot of ground balls and trying to get these guys to up their defense.
Yeah, and there'll be a bargain bin market that if Bregman does sign elsewhere that you could shop later in the offseason. Yoan Moncada, one-time heralded prospect with the Red Sox, who over the last 2 years has done nothing but stink or be injured. But hey, there are tools there, and he did play at an all-star level for a season or two, 4 or 5 years ago. And if you could get him on the cheap and take a shot, it's not a real rosy outlook, but this is the portion of the program I remind the Astros still have a core, a nucleus of both lineup and pitching that has them, as we talk, still the favorite to defend and win another American League West, and certainly at least be in the race.
Nothing gets kids excited more than Christmas shopping at Dollar General. In another departure, we got news last week that front office special advisor Reggie Jackson will be leaving the Astros. He hasn't ruled out going to another team, which seems to point to this possibly being a dismissal or maybe a parting of philosophies or something like that. But we've gone into great depth about the murky nature of the decision-making hierarchy within the organization. Do you guys, obviously without knowing any inside scoops here, do you guys read anything into this? Maybe a philosophical departure from how they've done things, or maybe possibly Reggie Jackson maybe feeling like he's not as utilized as he'd like to be?
I mean, Reggie's 78 years old, so if this is the second franchise that doesn't utilize him to the extent that he would wish to be utilized, so it goes. I just think his contract was up, and these are trying financial times for the Astros with their payroll. So if Reggie was making $250,000, $500,000, somewhere personal affinity and having a Hall of Fame buddy at his golf course, and Reggie's event at Crane's Place in Palm Beach, raised a lot of money. But does it stick in Crane's craw, the Montero Abreu offseason? So I don't think he was counting the days to where he could get Reggie off the payroll. But I don't think on a day in, day out basis, Reggie Jackson was an important decision maker. But he had influence on a couple that are part of why the Astros are payroll hamstrung, unless Jim Crane says we're willing to blow through all tax levels for 2025.
I mean, if I'm just trying to read into this, which is what we're doing, I'm wondering, is this one less voice in the room? Does this mean Dana Brown's going to have a little more input? We know from that Reggie Jackson interview that it was him and Bagwell and Biggio, had a lot of say in the decision making there. So does that mean maybe Dana's going to get an opportunity to really put his stamp on this thing? And then also Reggie talked about how, he's in California. That's where his family was. He was kind of tired of having to travel in a few times a month to Houston or wherever the Astros were sending him. If he's interested in going back to the Yankees, it doesn't make a lot of sense to have that much further travel. The other thing I thought, it was kind of interesting to me that he talked about how much he loved Jim Crane and the opportunity to work with Jim Crane, what a great leader he is and how much he learned from him. I didn't notice in that article him saying anything about how much he liked working with Dana Brown or working with Jeff Bagwell or anybody else. So I thought that was interesting that he gave all the love to Jim Crane, and it probably is just a deal where his contract expired. But as a hopeful Astros fan, here's that hope word again, right, Charlie? I would like to see Dana Brown really be able to do what he wants to do and then be accountable for the results. I think that's what we kind of always want. I remember back in the day with the Texans, it was who drafted JJ Watt and who was really involved in that and who was the real decision maker. And then it became hard to make anybody accountable for the results. So I'd like to see the Astros be just a little more forthcoming with this is who's leading us, and we'll see how they perform.
It does beg the question of whether Jeff Bagwell could be next on the chopping block or the departure block, if we want to be more politically correct here. But I think the difference between those two is that Bagwell being an Astro Hall of Famer is certainly a big difference. But on the other hand, I don't know that his presence is as looked upon as kindly now among his fans, now that they kind of lump him in and associate him with some of these poor decisions that were made, that you outlined, Charlie. So I think that's going to be a real interesting, development as we see whether Bagwell is long for this team or not, because he's prior to his involvement with, these contracts and the Abreu thing, most notably, Bagwell was, you could see him as a mascot for the team, a face of the organization. But I do wonder whether I don't know how I would say it, that the bloom has kind of withered on his standing with the fan base here. And that's a shame because, the guy is a Hall of Famer and, was one of the more iconic players that's ever played on this team. But such is the news cycle. I think if he were to go away and spend some time away from this organization and come back, I think the reception would be much more kind to him because all of that would be in the rear view. That's just my thought. We'll end it there. That's it for this episode of Stone Cold Stros. We're going to have another episode dropping on Wednesday. We're going to dig into some of the news and rumors around pitching. So keep an eye out for that. And until then, go Stros.